Donald Trump has a strategy. You may not like it. We may not think it's right. Supreme Court's not doing a darn thing about it. It's to use the shadow docket, the emergency application docket, to his advantage. In a normal United States Supreme Court case, although we're getting very few of those, full briefing, full record developed below by a trial judge. The judges have plenty of time for contemplation and reflection. There's oral argument, so questions can be answered. There's months that go by. There's lobbying that goes on behind the scenes by court clerks and judges. There's circulation of competing orders. There's vote gathering. There's arm twisting for votes. It matters. And then justice comes out the other side. You know, it's sort of like sausage making. You don't want to see it being made, but it's important. But now, the emergency docket, we have none of that. And Donald Trump knows it. He knows automatically he's got reflexively 4 votes in his back pocket: Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh. And then he's only got to try to get one of 2, Roberts or Amy Coney Barrett, over to his side and do it in a very fast way. Limited briefing, just 2 briefs, very short amount of time, limited record, no time for reflection, days, not months pass, no oral argument. That's to Donald Trump's advantage, and he knows it. We break it down what that has meant so far for cases, including related to labor and employment, the federal workforce, and unions, only on Unprecedented, a new show that we've been doing on Legal AF for the last 6 months. Dina Sayegdal, Michael Popok, and here's a clip. Speaking of a new yet another fake emergency, why don't you talk about Gwen Wilcox and Kathy Harris and what the Trump administration is trying to do using the stampeding method of filing this emergency application.
Yeah, and Justice Jackson in that Aliens Enemies Act case, that was her focus of her dissent, was these shadow dockets are a problem because there's no real record.
I like the way she put it. She said, we've made errors as a Supreme Court in the past, but at least there was a record that we could point to. Now we're making errors, but we're doing it with a scant record left behind, like no footprints on the sand. That's a problem. That's a problem.
That was a very pointed, let's say, and so true, because they do take limited cases. Like just a side note, real fast. I mean, I know a judge, the local judge, he has like 3,000 cases that he manages, right? I mean, you compare that to, you said 60 or 70, the Supreme Court. They don't take that many cases because they're supposed to do deep dive, in depth, in them. They are the last deciders of our law. They are supposed to be thoughtful about it. So the shadow docket is like a complete, like major carve out to how they are supposed to function, and definitely a real problem. So, okay, the Wilcox case. So basically, we have talked about this case before, but this is coming to the Supreme Court. We had talked before about how it's going to come to the Supreme Court, but the Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to look into it. The Supreme Court is looking into it. And that what is at issue is basically, when can a president fire a leader of an independent board, right? And the rule back from the 1930s, I can't remember the exact date of that opinion that came about, Humphrey's executor said that a president cannot fire a head of one of these independent agencies, right? This was FDR at the time, and they were kind of trying to rein him in. Since then, not that long ago, in the 2000s, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion making a carve out, right? They were trying to fire, actually, I think it was, I don't misquote me, maybe it wasn't Trump, but I think it might have been Trump firing the head of the Consumer Federal Protection Board. And Justice Roberts allowed him to do that, creating a carve out, saying, well, it's because there was just one member of the head. The president's allowed to do that. But if
that was Trump in his first term. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. And, but a multi-member board, a president can't do that. And Roberts specifically said that in his opinion. Now the Trump administration is firing a member of a multi-member board. So if you really took Chief Justice Roberts' word, not that long ago, we're talking about the first Trump administration, this would be a clear-cut illegal action for Trump to be firing the head or one of the members of these boards.
Yeah, go ahead. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but Chief Justice Roberts, so basically the lower court had said that reinstated Wilcox to the board, and Roberts basically undid that order, which means, interestingly, that the Labor Relations Board doesn't have their statutory 3-member requirement to do anything. So during this time, until the Supreme Court actually makes a decision, nothing can be done there, which is
or at the Merit Service Protection Board. So he's basically immobilized both of them.
yeah.
And if the Supreme Court on merits gives Donald Trump the ability to do that and overturns Humphrey's executor as the precedent, even though they had a chance to do that in 2020 with that Celia law case, they didn't do it. But if they do that, Donald Trump's not going to put anybody in. He's just going to let it. He doesn't like the National Labor Relations Board.
There you
He doesn't
go.
like the Merit Service Protection Board. You know who likes them? Federal workers and unions.
Yeah.
Good job, unions, not supporting Kamala Harris. Now you have no National Labor Relations Board protecting you against abusive workplace practices and collective bargaining practices. And federal workers, the same. I mean, I don't know. How do you think that one's going to play out with the way the Supreme Court is constituted?
Yeah, I mean, you would think Chief Justice Roberts, what did we talk about 5 years ago? You just finished saying that a president can't do this. What kind of hoops are you going to try to fit yourself into?
What kind of brand of stupid are you?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough when they reverse any precedent, right? When they reverse in Roe, their arguments were ridiculous. But when you're trying to reverse your own precedent that you wrote the majority opinion for, that's a tough pill to swallow. But I believe in Roberts enough that he may twist himself into a knot, because as we've talked about before, the Federalist Society judges, which are, Roberts and Kavanaugh, et cetera, believe in the executive unitary theory, which is an inflated theory of the president. And if you believe in that, you would say, sure, the president should be able to fire these people. But then again, Trump has shown them over and over he's not so trustworthy with that power. So it'll be interesting.
We had here on Legal AF, we had the pleasure of interviewing Jamie Raskin 2 days ago, Court of Accountability Actions, Alex Aronson and me. And in our discussion with Representative Raskin, we were reminded that when Sandra Day O'Connor was the swing vote appointed by Reagan to the United States Supreme Court, and when that unitary presidential model bullshit was presented to her, she looked around and said, I'm sorry, that is a fringe theory that has never been accepted by the United States Supreme Court. This is in the 80s and 90s. And now in 2025, because they've got the numbers, this what had always been considered to be a fringe aberrational theory about, not that there's only one occupant of the executive branch, we understand that. It's that this unitary theory that he can do whatever he wants within the sphere, even if for an agency or a board that was created in a bipartisan way by Congress. That's our problem. That's why I have to answer a lot of questions for some of our international fans and audience, because they're like, well, why is that? The Congress set it up. Why doesn't it just live independently? Because we have to shove something into one of the three branches. And we don't have a fourth branch or a free agent branch where you just get to float out there. So if it's something that needs to execute on policy, that has to go in the executive branch. Once it's there, what Donald Trump doesn't want, and the Supreme Court has been letting him, he doesn't want to have any oversight or checks and balance. And he doesn't want to respect the fact that thing was created in a bipartisan way, specifically to protect it from political whim. That's why these terms are longer, 5-6 years, so it overlaps presidents. That's why you can't have all one party on there. But once you stick it under the executive branch and you adopt the the unitary presidential model, then none of that mattered. It didn't matter what Congress intended. But then where's the checks and balance in that? That's why Sandra Day O'Connor said, I'm sorry, that never was really accepted by the founding fathers or framers. I mean, I know where it comes from. There's a guy who writes a lot of law review articles named Steve Calabrese, and it's the Steve Calabrese model, and these guys are the adherents of it. But there's other people that write other things, like Cass Sunstein, that are like, no, that's never been out of the framers would never have allowed a royal king president. Are you effing crazy? So this is the battle that you and I have been following closely. And let's end today with a win for the Trump administration related to a decision by Judge Alsop out in your neck of the woods, or at least in California, who ruled that it was arbitrary and capricious to fire 16,000 first-year employees, what they call probationary employees. But we got a new ruling from the Supreme Court on that, at least temporarily, procedurally. And what happened there?
Yeah. So again, this is procedure. And, just to point out too, I mean, the Supreme Court always wants to decide on a procedural issue if they can, because the idea is to make as little changes in the law as possible. This isn't even necessarily deciding on a procedural issue because they haven't gotten to the point of full briefing, let's say, right? But for example, the case that went in front of them with the abortion pill last term, the Supreme Court decided that they didn't have standing, the parties didn't have standing. And they didn't have to go into the substance, right, of whether or not that should stand or not. But so here, again, on a procedural issue, they said that the nonprofits and the unions were both suing, saying that the way Trump fired the probationary employees was illegal. And the court said that the nonprofits didn't have standing. So the injunction, basically, they reversed it, which would have allowed him to fire the probationary employees, but that the unions can continue and seek an injunction. So, these poor employees, let's be frank. This is the problem. It's like,
you better find a new job. Welcome back. We sit at the intersection of law, politics, the United States Supreme Court. So you don't have to. And hopefully we make you smarter about things related to the United States Supreme Court. You understand them better because we take the time to learn it ourselves. We're constitutional scholars and people who are steeped in the law, and we bring it to you the only way we know how, in a simple but educational method. We don't patronize. We don't talk down to you. We just tell you the truth. And we do it every week here on Legal AF and all of our hot takes. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. So until my next reporting on Unprecedented or Otherwise related to Legal AF, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.